The Languedoc. What I want to talk about this morning is may not seem directly anything to do with business, but actually it has in my view. And what actually caused me to think about this is that, it's stating the obvious that there's an awful lot of stress, there's an awful lot of pressure, there's an awful lot of frustration around, around the world for a variety of different reasons and for very good reasons. You've got everything to do with COVID. And as we kind of come out of quarantine, there are some people ignoring it and some people just kind of just trying to actually reclaim their lives as they had it before, which, is putting everybody else at risk in terms of, getting another bout of this later on in the year, which if you believe the scientists, that's very likely to happen. So there's that kind of fear, frustration that a lot of people are experiencing, and also you have everyone's response to the George Floyd incident, which is absolutely appalling, and again, I think that the way the reaction has been are somewhat connected because I think it's been there's been a consequence of a lot of pent up frustration about the COVID, and I think you've seen that in some of the reaction about George Floyd. And the George Floyd incident certainly sparks me to, as a white European, I can sit and say, well, okay, well, it's kind of nothing to do with me, and isn't it awful? But what can I do? But the truth of the matter is, yes, there is something I can do, and the one thing that I can do is to educate myself, because the more I look into the subject, the whole issue about, racial challenges, the more I realize I don't know enough. I know it at the surface level, but I don't know enough. But that's slightly going away from the point I was trying to make, is that, if we look at this frustration and how it plays out and how we actually manage ourselves in during this time. And I was reminded of a book that I've read numerous times, I'm sure, and millions of others have as well, which is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And one of the things that always struck me, so many things struck me, but in regard to what I'm talking about today, is the what he says about one of the last of the human, freedoms is to choose, one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And when you think of the context in which he was writing that, when he was writing it as he was in the concentration camps, it's extraordinary that, he says, I can actually choose my attitude at this moment in time. And I think it's a lesson to all of us. But the other quote, which is kind of connected to me, was from the French-Cuban writer Anne Nin, who says, we don't see things as we are, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And again, both of those kind of, in my mind, play to kind of what are we actually taking into our minds? What are the thoughts that we're actually giving energy to? Now, I'm not suggesting you can't stop thoughts coming into your head, because none of us can. That's just impossible to do. But I do have a choice about what I give energy to. And what I give energy to will influence how I behave. So, if you go back to the Nin comment, is that, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So if I'm filled with, anger and rage and rancor and frustration, that is actually going to influence, how I see things and consequently how I behave, which is not healthy. But if we can bring ourselves to be more reflective of it and to understand that, how I will play out in the world is a consequence of what I give energy to in my own mind, then it makes us somewhat more discerning about what it is that we actually feed our minds with and what we actually engage our minds with. Because that you can't stop the thought coming in. It's a bit like saying in meditation, I'm just going to think of nothing. That's not possible. At least in my view, it's not possible. But what is possible is to determine whether I give energy to this particular thought or whether I don't. And that is my choice. And I just think that in today's world and this time where there is so much, frustration and pent up frustration with a lot of things, and validly so. But I think we just got to be really mindful about what we give energy to in our own heads, because that will certainly influence how we see things and would also influence our behavior. And as a consequence, it'll influence the people that are around us, maybe very close to us in a family situation, but also in a business environment. So just a couple of things that came from both Viktor Frankl and Anne Nin that I kind of put together in my own head. And I'm saying this as much as a lesson to myself as to anybody else, because we all have to be mindful of it. So just wanted to share that with you. So we'll talk real soon.